My journey here starts, my wife was born in Cape Town, and every 5 years she's allowed to take me on holiday, kicking and screaming. And she told me in January, in December 1999, that I was coming on holiday to see where she was born, which was in Cape Town. And so I got on what was only my second ever long-haul flight and flew into your country. Was in Newtown within a day, stayed here a week, went down to Cape Town, Durban, came back to Joburg, and by the time I came back here, I was completely under the spell of your country. What its potential was, and what the potential of my sector, which I knew very, very well in the UK was, might be to make a contribution. And so I argued and fought my way into the British Council and into DAXT at that time, and ended up with 2 pieces of work to do. But at the first conference that I attended, I realized, first of all, that many people had been where I was before me and knew your country a lot better than I did. And I was introduced as a visiting expert, and I said, whoops. I said, I don't think I'm a visiting expert. I hope I'm a current pert. But what I actually am is an impert, which is a cross between an import and an impertinence. And if that has stayed with me throughout 15 years, and I still don't feel any different, I can never be South African. I can never have your history. All I can say is that I've tried to learn throughout the time that I've been here. And I've learned from many people, but in my field of culture and regeneration, I want to pay a particular note to Avril Joffe and the work that she's done throughout this period and is now doing across the continent in this field. So, I've met some extraordinary people when I've been here, but none more than Justice Albie Sachs of the Constitutional Court, that was of the Constitutional Court. And he wrote something in the Sunday Times in October 2000, which I carry with me all the time. I'm going to read it out this morning. We are in a strange position. No group is in charge. No section exercises cultural hegemony power. The old establishment has lost its hauteur, but no confident and powerful new establishment has emerged to replace it. What we lack is confidence, organization, focus, and leadership. We have to learn to enjoy and to be invigorated by the multiplicity of our cultural forms and to get used to being as we are, even while we are changing. And that last sentence, get used to being as we are, even while we are changing, has been absolutely exemplified in the nuances and the sophistication and the caring and the love and the anger and the passion that has informed this conference. The sad thing is that that was written in 2000 and it's now 2015. And one of the themes that I'm going to be talking about is that this process has been achingly slow. But as somebody said yesterday, now it must, it will, it can, it has to change, and then it will accelerate. So, this slide is getting a bit old, but it's an absolute watchword for any visitor coming into South Africa working with culture. Johnny Wilkinson is explaining to David Beckham that in order to win the World Cup, he just had to kick the ball over the bar and we would win. And Bex, who isn't the brightest of people, then went on to the European Cup, kicked the ball over the bar, and we lost. So you just have to be a little bit careful when you're in South Africa. And there's 3 questions that have dominated my journey in your country. The first is this one. What in hell's name is a world-class African city? It isn't Lagos. Is it Johannesburg? It's not Cape Town. Is it Durban? What is it? And that, particularly in the context of this city, which was 3 farms in 1886, only 3 farms, and is now going to, with Vereeniging and with Pretoria, within Gauteng, going to become Africa's first global city. It'll have a population of 20 million, It'll be a mile in the sky, just like Mexico City, within 10 or 15 years. This is the powerhouse that will drive sub-Saharan Africa without a shadow of doubt. The second long journey was to understand that if I wanted to understand urban South Africa, I had to understand rural South Africa. That is the province of the Eastern Cape, turned through 90 degrees and superimposed on England. And the province of the Eastern Cape has got a population of 7 million. Population of South Africa is the same as the population of England, but it's spread over a landmass the size of Germany, France, Italy, Holland, and the UK combined. It's a big place. And that's the inheritance. The white bits were owned by whites, and the cities were white by night and owned by whites, and the theatres only allowed blacks in as cleaners, until a frighteningly short time ago. And that history is alive in every moment of every view out of a bus window in South Africa still. It's changing massively. I'm going to show you some of that shortly. But that is the end result, not just of apartheid, that's the end result of colonialism as well. And one of the projects that I did was to go back to the natural world and swallows, and to create the Swallows Partnership, Sihlanganiswa Zinkonjani, to try and exchange between the cultures of the Amaxhosa and the cultures of the northeast of England, where I come from, a very un-British kind of a region, the homeland of the Industrial Revolution, of the Labour Party and of trade unionism. But this is the underlying truth of the presence of the British in South Africa, the empire in Africa and the empire in South Africa. When I was setting up the Swallows Partnership, I went and presented to the formidable MEC for Culture in the Eastern Cape, Abraham Ntantizo. And I did my presentation about why we should have this memorandum of understanding, why we should work together. And she said, fine, Peter, don't go on. We were at dinner, don't go on. We'll do it. We'll do it by the book. But I have to tell you, Peter, that if at the end of the day, before the Premier signs this memorandum, we have any reason to walk away, we will walk away. After all, Peter, we've very little reason to trust the British. Oof. What? The British? So I went and did my homework, which I should have done before I sat down at the table. The frontier wars. Yes, we do tourism about that. No. The 100 Years' War of Dispossession. Over 100 years, the Amaxhosa fought the British through 9 wars, the last 2 of which were genocidal. And I just didn't know. I'd worked in Northern Ireland. I knew all about the length of memory, of death, of loss in family, of everything else. I hadn't applied it here. I had to learn it. So that's me. That's me trying to understand. And this is me trying to apply it to Newtown. Where does Newtown come from? Newtown starts as the Cooley location in Johannesburg. And then when the municipal government wanted to build a new fruit and vegetable market, a fresh produce market, suddenly it was discovered there was a cholera outbreak. It's extraordinary. It happens around the world. And it had to be burnt down and replaced by the fruit and vegetable market, which then came in. What's interesting about that is that many of the Jewish traders, now very wealthy Jewish businessmen in Johannesburg, will say when you talk to them about their journey, that they didn't have any higher education at all. What they did is they went to the University of Newtown. They learnt on the job, they learnt on the barrows, they learnt on the fruit stalls, they learnt selling chickens. But in 1986, which is very, very early in the history of thinking about cultural quarters, Newtown was declared a cultural quarter. As early as 1976, the Serpent players had bought the auction ring, and that enabled in 1986, when the debate was around the pulling down of the power station, the quarter to be declared as a cultural quarter. By 1994, this project, which was an arts-led quarter, an internationally validated arts-led project, had to confront the reality of a new Department of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology. Thank you, Sharif. Thank you very much. A new Department of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology, which adopted a much, much broader definition of the arts and cultures. 11 languages, 9 provinces. Not the Europeanized version of what a cultural quarter might be. But as early as 1998, Stephen Sack, Monica Newton, and others, Andre Leroux, were producing the cultural industry's growth strategy. And then in 2000, just after Joburg couldn't pay its bills, before Eskom couldn't provide the power, Eskom were going to cut off the power to Joburg because it couldn't pay its bills. We had this extraordinary period where we had a mixture of neoliberal privatization of everything from the zoo to the theatre to refuse collection, alongside massive Keynesian investment in the Mandela Bridge, in Constitution Hill, in Newtown, and so on. And I was there by then. This was when I'd come in, and we identify the cultural arc as one of the ways in which we might be able to pull together and conceptualize the role of culture in a very rapidly changing city. Then we go through the period that we've, in this room, many of us suffered from those long periods of standard writings. But we had, for a period of years through to 2008, the active support of the Johannesburg Development Agency, his team, Graham Reed, and then Oliso Ngema, in holding together with programming the Newtown Cultural Quarter. Then we have the global crash, just as the mayoral charter comes into being, and apart from a little blip when we had money for the World Cup, it's been pretty much on the surface downhill ever since. So where are we now? Now, I was going to use a pointer or stand at one of the screens and talk you through what's in Newtown. I'm just going to have to take it that you all know what's in Newtown. The only point I would make is that over 15 years, there has been substantial transformation at both the leadership level and in senior management positions of the cultural organizations in Newtown. And that is of fundamental importance to where I'm going next, because if that hadn't happened, where I'm suggesting we might go couldn't be the case. And just incidentally, that large brown blob at the top, okay, is where the Newtown Junction retail mall now is. But what's much more important is that underneath that is 4,000 car parking spaces. That's the big hole. Well, it's not quite Kimberley, but it's getting there. So back in 2008, we were able to conceptualize thinking about the role, the different roles of very widely defined culture, which includes what's happening in the street in Yeovil, yeah? Within our thinking about how the city, the inner city, might work. And Janet, I draw your particular attention to the 14th parallel there, linking across from Newtown to what's called the Ellis Park cluster, yeah? And also to the way in which Maboneng precinct has come on substantially in recent periods. And that purple blob in the middle at the bottom is what in hell's name is the long-term future of Library Gardens, the Duncan Hall, City Hall, and the Risick Street Post Office going to be. So, the Newtown, our review of the concept. The one thing that any successful cultural quarter has to do is it has to be safe, clean, and it has to be consistently programmed, daytime, nighttime, weekdays, and holidays, so that any visitor knows that when they come to Joburg, they can go there at the daytime or in the evening, and it will work. Yeah? Newtown marketing has mistakenly adopted the phrase of Newtown where the buzz is, or did about 7 years ago. that's misunderstanding what the nature of the Newtown precinct could ever be. Buzz in city regeneration terms happens when you get an awful lot of people who are very similar to each other doing exactly the same thing with each other in a single place. So what happens in Braamfontein on Thursday and Friday nights now is buzz. What happens in Maboneng is buzz. What happens in Newtown when Brad is programming Africana hip-hop is rather different from his Thursday night Rasta. When the Market Theatre's got one show on, or when there's a dance festival on, there are different people coming through. How in hell's name do you pitch retail into that? It's not very easy. It's different. Newtown has to achieve a certain scale before there's a sufficient body of visitors to support the retail, particularly the catering, that needs to be there. The original concept, therefore, of a cultural quarter, which was based around people with an established interest in the arts and culture, with enough money to be able to buy tickets, and with an interest in the new and the experimental, etc., which is what would characterize a cultural quarter in other European or American or Australian cities. The conditions for that are just not here. They weren't then, and they aren't now. But they could be, and I believe they will be. And I want to show you some research that we've done that tries to track the changing nature of South African society using living standard measures as produced by the South African Advertising Research Foundation. What SARF have done for the advertising industry, who do not mess about, yeah? They are spending millions on advertising to get you to buy what they are producing. So they don't mess about in trying to understand who and what you are and how you are changing. This isn't the census. This is checked and checked again and checked against actual purchases that are being made. So living standard measures don't look at ethnicity. They don't look at individual income or household income. They look at what a household has got access to in the way of cell phones, wall-mounted TVs, vehicles, holidays, etc., etc. Durable. What is it? What products are they that each household has access to? And it grades them on the slides that I'm going to show you next, from the rural poor through farm worker levels, through informal settlements around the fringes generally of small to medium towns and cities, to the urban poor, to the something to lose group. You can feel it. The lower middle class is arriving. To the folks in the flats, to the toehold in the middle class, to townhouses and retired housewives with holiday spenders, and welcome to Easy Street, which is where a small number of us have been privileged to live in South Africa. So think left to right, people with the least access to goods and services, people on the right, people with the most access to goods and services. That is the situation in 2001 in your country, okay? Still a huge number of people in the rural and urban poor, yeah? That is the situation in 2011. I'll go back. You want to see the achievement of the ANC in power? Those two slides. You don't notice it particularly in a city. My God, you notice it in the rural areas. And look, this isn't about black diamonds. They're important. This is the growth of the black, lower, aspirational, and black middle class. Now let's look at this in terms of provinces and the differences. I'm just going to talk through this. Look at KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape in 2001. Just look at them for the moment. Look at where rural poverty was concentrated and the voting base, okay? Now look at it in 2011. Now look at Joburg. Oh, sorry, look at Gauteng in 2001 and 2011. And just for you, Rashid, look at Cape Town, Western Cape. It's the same phenomenon, yeah? I've never seen it really written about. But it's what's happening. It's what's driving the market. It's the aspiration of the arriving young, black, middle class. I'm an old socialist, brothers. But the route to salvation, the route to the future of your country lies in these people and in the relief and getting rid of acute poverty. And just so we can look at the cities, just look at what's happened in Joburg. There's 2001, and there's 2011. Now there you've got two things going. One is the continuing growth of the lower middle class, but then look at the growth of the top-end spending in Joburg. And in Cape Town, if you wish. But look at Joburg, because that's what I'm talking about. Those are proportions, yeah? Okay, so if that's what's happening to the market out there, that's the context for the numbers we've been having about the creative and cultural industries in South Africa. That's the opportunity that is there. I caught you saying last night about the Australian tour and the South African tour. If that isn't happening, that ambition is never going to happen. It's never going to work. And it ain't going to be Whitey buying the tickets. So, how do we build a new vision for Newtown over this period? What we did was that we went, first of all, and looked at where national policy was moving. The National Growth and Development Strategy, absolutely clear. The national priorities are in economic growth and in address to redress and social empowerment and social well-being in society. It doesn't say arts and culture. It might just about say creative industries, and it might just about say the role of arts and culture in our communities. What we found was, when we talked to all 37 of the cultural organizations based in Newtown, and we talked about what they were actually doing to survive and work, what they wanted to do more of, is that they all were already working in fields like education, like training, like sending people to work within health, within prisons, Janet, etc. There was an engagement with precisely this agenda, which was very different from the way in which we kept trying to present Newtown as a cultural quarter, which would attract people in the evenings to go and spend and whatever. There was a different reality happening. And a final little check. We agonized over. The name is tired, it's dreadful, it's in English, it doesn't translate, it's whatever. And then I happened to catch a soapy. And the young, black, cool executive was sitting behind his desk, and into the office came this beautiful, sexy, new member of staff who said, there's someone, a new girl, is wondering whether you might be interested in taking her to a gallery opening which is happening in Newtown tonight. When was the last gallery opening in Newtown? There hasn't been one for 10 years. But it's stuck in the media imagination. And it's stuck in the ambition of all of the young artists I knew in Nelson Mandela Bay or in the Keiskamma Valley. The young people had heard about Newtown. We're not going to throw it away. We're going to use it. So, What have we got? We've got a really strong set of projects in education already, led by the extraordinary Saibono. It's that big building. Probably not too many people here have seen it. The trick Saibono did was to become an agent of the Gauteng provincial government. It now has a turnover of 350 million rand a year, providing educational services in science and technology to the Gauteng provincial government. It runs Saturday schools in science in schools throughout Gauteng. It brings people who don't have science teaching in their schools yet into Newtown to take courses within the science and engineering environment of the building, and it wins contracts to train people for example, broadband education Could we do something similar in the arts and humanities and live events and tech and whatever? Is this something we can do? Can we run a program for the schools of Gauteng and wider? What can we do with junior schools rather than bust them in and make them punish them by making them walk around Museum Africa? What can we do with Matric? What can we do with FE? Where are our links to HE courses? Where are our international links with postgraduates? And the answer is bits of them are there everywhere throughout Newtown. And we offer careers guidance. And in training, we start with careers guidance. Interns, volunteers, residencies, learnerships, apprenticeships, professional development. I still can't do the Q. Kwezen Kubeko, the traveling teachers of the arts in arts and community health prisons, etc. There was a whole range of engagements there that we could use. And then the creative industries. And I just went back to the value chain. I said, what's our IP? What's the intellectual property of Newtown? The first thing is the art that's made, the new things that are created. But the second thing is it's all of the archives of the city. This is the only city, it must be the most important city on the world, whose entire history is on photographs. Have any of those been monetized? No? Where are the iconic documents that haven't been used, that aren't in postcards or whatever? We own that. The city owns that. And we are already involved in all stages of that value chain in the production that is happening in Newtown. And you'll know this slide, and I've only put it up because I want to say that there are underpinning skills for almost all of those creative industries in management, which is my field, and in technical support, which is yours. Some of them are different. You've not got into, you hang exhibitions, but you've not adopted the visual arts and galleries and museums and hanging within your definitions because you've gone down the live arts route. But there's a big future in this and in that for you. So we identified the components, and I thought we had two ladders. I thought we had a primary school to postgraduate research and new intellectual property through to monetized import and export business and touring shows around the world. And my dear colleague, David April, who nobody disagrees with me easily, right? Let's be clear about this, right? But David did. He said, you're wrong, Peter. He said, they aren't two separate ladders. They're the DNA of Newtown. They're inextricably intertwined with each other, and they feed off each other. The two processes of learning and creation, of growing your learning and your understanding in the world, and growing your capacity to be a creator and a producer and a business or whatever in our field, are absolutely linked together. And in all your conversation about continuing professional development and so on, I think you've exemplified that. The fifth building block is that Newtown can be a virtual location. Johannesburg is a brand, Newtown is a brand. Live from the stage of the Market Theatre, I promise you, internationally, is as powerful a brand as live from the stage of the National Theatre in London. We should be planning and working. James and Annabelle may well be doing it already, I don't know. But live from baseline in South Africa will mean something. And also for educational and training products carrying the brand. So I think we've got a digital future alongside a physical one. And we have, in terms of the Silverstone formula, we have the centers of excellence in Artist Proof Studio, in printmaking, in the Market Photography Workshop, in SARA, in Market Theatre. We have the centers of excellence. There are very few of them in South Africa at the moment in the fields I'm talking about. There is excellence in motion pictures and so on. That's located somewhere else. Everything doesn't have to be in Newtown. That's not the point I'm making. There are some forms in which we're very strong, but where we don't have the right facilities. And there are some facilities we don't have. We don't have a hub where all of the interns and apprentices and students can meet together and coffee and work and free Wi-Fi and etc. And we don't have incubator spaces or sufficient of them at the moment. And most of all, we don't have yet a concerted vision and a leadership and management and institutional design that could support a single precinct that's both a cultural quarter for visitors, a specialist cultural college, a creative industry park, and has a digital version of all three of those. And all of them linked to other centers in the city, the province, the country, and internationally. I think that can be done. And I think there's a catalytic project that could pull it off, which I'm not going to talk a lot about. But everybody who I've met in Newtown for the past 15 years says we've got to do something about Museum Africa. And that includes the staff. Something's got to be done. It's a huge building. How am I doing for time? Am I fine? Okay. Do you know how Museum Africa was conceived in the 80s? This is a shocking story. This is before the change in the 80s. And if you think about the way in which those concrete ramps work, and you walk up from the basement and around and up to the top, this was meant to be the ascent of man. You start in the bottom with the rocks. You move on to the fossils. Then there's that funny little walkway with 3 little huts on it, which had little black people outside it, primitive black people outside the huts. Then you walked on up and you passed the gold bar, yeah? And at the very top, there was a toposcope. When you looked out at the triumph of human evolution, which was the white city of Johannesburg, I think not, yeah? And the curator at the time said, you know, Peter, we were working on this and we were very excited. And then we looked outside one day and we thought things were changing. And we wondered whether we should continue. And they pressed the pause button. And what you experience when you walk into Museum Africa is the pause button. And what a place to live and work, eh? With a half-staffed organogram. So we're working on the idea, on the question. Could we get enough permission and enough buy-in to think about bringing the mall onto the square through the middle of Museum Africa and reconceiving the collections and the ambition in terms of groups of the creative industries on those floor plates, and putting in the middle, in the walkthrough, something. When South Africa goes to China or India, takes an expo of the finest of its creations in X, Y, or Z, yeah? Where's our own cultural and creative industries expo inside our own city? Where do all of the visitors that we want to stay the extra night in Joburg before they go to Cape Town, where do they go? Do I want them buying out of Africa at the airport shop? Do I want them to see the best of the new fashion that's here? Do I want them to see? Could we have a floor for music, and live events? Can we have a floor for craft and design? Can we have retail at the front of it? Let's be realistic. This isn't going to be public sector funded. Let's try and earn some money here. Let's try and earn some money for the people who do the creation and make the damn things. Let's use location. Let's use those 4,500 car parking spaces. So we're thinking big. We're testing the idea out, and we're getting a good hearing. That's all I can say at the moment. I'm nearly finished. So, perspectives from an optimist at your conference. I've been impressed, very, by the realism about the transformation and the pace of it, and the ability and the willingness to put the past behind you. Believe me, if you don't do that, you won't move forward. Painful as it is, and asking the most of those who have given the most and suffered the most as it is, it's what you have to do. That requires a matching generosity from those who have given the least and done the least, and whose associations turned into clubs, comfort clubs, awards clubs. You have to look forward. I believe you have the ability to do that. Secondly, the raw quality of the emerging and emerged new leadership in the sector, black leadership in the sector, black and mixed heritage leadership in the sector. It is powerful, it's authentic, it's different, it's still angry, and it should be. Thirdly, what research might show you. Rashid and I had this conversation. Track the people who you've had training contact with. Talk to UOJ and WITS in your own universities about people who've gone through the courses. See what jobs they're actually doing now. See where your spread actually is. It doesn't matter. People aren't lost to the economy if they're lost to the sector, yeah? If they're working. Yeah? If they still value the start they got in life coming through here and they're now running a successful restaurant, great, I like food. You've noticed. So don't worry, don't be protective. Be proud of the scale in which this has enabled people to move and to move across. The LSMs I've just shown you. The economy is coming, even in its slow, faltering state. It's coming towards you, and the digital natives, the generation that can way outperform Kahiso in terms of thumb skill or whatever, right? They're in the rural areas too, believe me. And I suggest you're in danger of not focusing enough on the digital potential in most of your areas. This is my penultimate point, and I think it's the most important thing I want to say here, and I want to say it to the young black technicians around the wall. Something quite extraordinary happened in the history of the way in which we've developed the theory of the creative industries. In very simple summary, it starts with an economist in the UK who wanted to track the economic impact of the arts. So he looked at funded arts organizations and worked out that people who went to arts events spent a lot of money on food and drink and went and stayed in hotels. That was the first piece of research. The second bit came from the Greater London Council, who said, we're fed up with this arts stuff. What we need to talk about is the cultural industries. We need the arts as a small part of the music industry, of television and broadcasting, of heritage and museums and all that sort of stuff. That's the cultural industries, yeah? And they're huge. And one, the rock and roll makes more money for the country than the car industry. And we were shocked. I mean, the country was shocked, I tell you, by that. And then along came those awfully bright people from New Labour who said, this is wrong. There's too much old, stodgy stuff in there. This is about the creative industries. This is about the creation of new IPR. That's what's the driver here. So we need software in here. Let's get rid of museums and all that lot. Let's talk about new, zappy, bright software, gaming, bang, 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 bang. That's the creative industries, and it's defined by the creation of intellectual property. And the dear little British Council and others sent our disciples off around the world to announce the new dawn of creative industries, because we'd discovered them and therefore we could teach them. And they hit Jodhpur. And in Jodhpur, they hit community, and they hit cultures, and they hit people who said, I'm not having my 1,000-year basket-making, weaving tradition taken by someone from outside, even from somebody from inside, and taken to New York and branded and make a fortune for them. This is ours. This is our collective property. This is the 11 languages and the cultures of your country. This is your richness. Yes, you will be continent leaders in the creative industries in the first world. But here in your country, in your home, in your provinces, with your people, with your cultures, your rituals, your ways of doing things, your ways of understanding the world, you are the masters of events and live events for your people. And go back to those LSMs. There's a huge market there. How good could the events be when the young men come back from the mountain? How much better and how much less of a rip-off could what is probably be the biggest element of live events in this country be, which is funerals? How much can you work with your own communities to build an events industry which is your own, in your own languages, and a safe industry here? How can you build, how can you not spend all of your time fighting for your rightful part in the global cultural cake? Make yourselves the masters of your events within your own cultures. And I wanted to offer you that to take into what has to happen next, which is the building of what Codessa called a sufficient consensus between you all to move forward. And I finish with one straightforward suggestion. Just do it. Just do it. Find something simple that you can all agree on. Maybe it's an event, yeah? And give it a name which is not one of any of yours. All of you sponsor it. Do it together. Learn by doing it live time together. Make it a training event. Make it an international winter school. Bring the experts in from elsewhere. Let them work with young South Africans. Go through the unit standards if you have to, right? But do something that is fun, enjoyable, creative, energetic, and put the rest outside the room while you do it. And I promise you, when you come back after that, your relationships will be changed. And I think it'll take you another 5 to 10 years, but you have every capacity to get there. And I wish you well. And that's it. Good morning.